The summer we found a sparrow with a crushed wing by the lilac bush began my long apprenticeship in patience. The day smelled of sun-warmed dust and lilac sweetness, and the air trembled with cicadas, as if the whole valley were listening for something gentle to happen. I was 10 then, a long shadow of a kid who believed that every truth wore the shape of a small mercy, and that mercy sometimes came on wings too small to notice at first. The lilacs bloomed in a pale, almost shy purple, and their heavy perfume drifted into the yard like a soft promise. The sparrow lay in the shade of the fence, one wing bent awkwardly, as if the world had pressed a little too hard on it. It kept fluttering its good wing, making a tiny, hopeful sound that sounded to me like a whisper of courage. My sister Elsie, 2 years older and always more practical than I, knelt beside it with a flat tin lid as a sort of impromptu nest, while our mother stood at the back door with a bowl of water that glinted in the sun. We carried the sparrow indoors, careful as if we were lifting something fragile from a shelf that could collapse under the weight of a single careless breath. The kitchen smelled of bread cooling on a rack and the faint sour tang of milk in a glass left too long on the table. The stove hissed and coughed as if it remembered winter, and the kettle sang a tiny coal-spark tune that seemed almost ceremonial. My mother, who had eyes that could see the dust motes dancing in sunlight, as if they were tiny planets, spoke in a soft voice that somehow made even the most ordinary things feel sacred. "Birds heal slowly," she said, "as if we would forget and need reminding." She handed me a pinch of crumbs soaked in water, the way you would offer a drink to a tired traveller. The crumbs softened into a muddy sweetness that clung to the sparrow's beak, and I watched its throat work in small, anxious gulps. The bird's breathing kept time with the ticking clock on the kitchen wall, a steady, patient rhythm that seemed to fill the room with a quiet confidence I did not yet possess. For days we kept vigil. The sparrow slept in a clumsy nest of tissue and a teacup in the corner of the room, where the light came in through the window with the tenderness of rain. There was a ritual to it. We spoke to the bird in hush-voice lullabies borrowed from my mother's own childhood, the songs she sang to us when we could not sleep, the ones that tasted faintly of lemon and sea salt. We changed the water twice a day, careful not to spill even a drop that might frighten the tiny creature into another flutter. We whispered about the way growth often looks like a secret, something slow and almost hard to recognize, until suddenly it is there. In the evenings, after chores were done, and the sun had lowered itself into the far hills like a tired cat curling up, we would sit on the back steps with the sparrow resting in a damp cloth on Elsie's knee. The yard took on a blue hush as the day cooled, and the scent of damp earth after rain rose from the gardens like a memory returning to its rightful place. Our father's old truck rumbled past on the lane, its engine sighing a welcome, as if to remind us that the world outside these four walls still moved with a patient, unhurried pace. From the road came the distant laughter of neighbours, the kind that had known your I learned then to attend to the sparrow as one attends to a small, sleeping life, with breath held, with a steady hand, with a patient listening that pretends to be nothing at all. My sister and I kept watch for the smallest changes, the way the sparrow's chest rose a fraction higher with each shallow breath, the way its eyes, when they finally opened, watched us back with a wary curiosity that felt almost like trust. There were days when the wing trembled with a little more hope, and days when it drooped again, a stubborn reminder of the damage done, and I found that my heart learned a slow rhythm, a cadence that did not hurry healing but invited it to take its own gentle time. I asked our mother once why the world moved so slowly at times, why even the most hopeful things had to wait. She smiled, not with the bright, quick grin of youth, but with a knowing, weathered warmth that came from many summers spent learning how to read the weather of people's souls as you would read a weather map. "Because grace doesn't rush," she said, wiping a strand of hair from her face as if brushing away a worry. "Grace stays until it's ready to fly." Her words were simple, and yet they settled inside me like a seed taking root in rich soil. On the 7th day, when the light in the kitchen window stretched long and honey-coloured across the table, the sparrow made a small, almost shy attempt to stand on its own 2 feet. It wobbled, and a cry escaped it. A sound so fragile that it seemed a scandal to hear such courage come out of something so tiny. My heart leaped in a way that surprised me, as if I had waited my entire life for that moment and did not even know it until it arrived. The wing steadied a touch, and the bird managed a short, uncertain hop toward the edge of the cloth. It did not fly away then, not yet, but a new kind of light entered the room, the kind that belongs to the moment when possibility ceases to be theoretical and becomes something you could almost hold in your hands. That evening, as the sun dipped beyond the cornfields and cast a copper thread across the creaky linoleum floor, we opened the door and carried the sparrow outside to a safe patch of lilac and thyme. We laid the cloth down gently, and the bird, with a stubborn little bravery, stepped onto the cool ground. It threw a cautious glance back at us, as if promising to remember our faces when it finally found its way, the way a traveller remembers a land before continuing toward an unknown horizon. We stood there, grandparents and children, and a small creature that had found its will again. And for a long while the yard held its breath in a hush that felt almost holy. The sparrow stretched its wings in a series of tiny, careful movements. No grand flourish, the quiet assurance that it could. Then it rose, not with a triumphal arc, but with a patient exhale of air that carried it upward in a soft, unhurried glide. It didn't vanish into the blue all at once. It steadied itself, glided along a curve, and settled briefly on a fence post, where it could survey its small, ordinary world again, before finally lifting into the distance. We did not cheer with loud voices. There was a long, grateful silence that settled around us like a light mist. The air smelled of summer-hot hay, warm earth, the faint sweetness of lilac fading into the evening, and there was something in that quiet, something tender and profound, that seemed to arrive from far away, and yet belonged to our own chests. In the days that followed, I found that the sparrow's recovery had imprinted itself on every ordinary moment. I walked the long country road to school with a slower, more careful pace, aware now of the hush between the cars that passed, and the way the world could seem to hold its breath when you needed it most. I paid attention to small kindnesses, how a neighbour would offer a hand with a fence that needed mending, how a stray dog would curl up at the edge of a porch and wait for someone to notice it, how the rain would come at once too late and just in time, depending on the mood of the earth. The sparrow's memory stayed with me as a compass of gentleness, a reminder that even a life as small as a bird's, when treated with care, can become a beacon for a larger life. Years moved on, as they always do, and the dog-eared corners of my childhood faded into a softer, deeper grey. But the memory of the sparrow The warm kitchen, the lilac-scented air, the patient hands guiding a fragile creature toward health remained a constant, a quiet shoreline against which I tested the tides of my own days. It taught me that healing is not a dramatic event, but a tapestry woven from tiny, deliberate acts. A crumb soaked in water given with patience, a rule of waiting, a voice kept steady in fear, a hand kept open in mercy. Now, as I live in a house that has grown too quiet for the life I once knew, I still hear the sparrow's soft, stubborn note in the back of my mind when I am wavering. I still see the lilac's purple hush and smell the sweetness of the kitchen where our mother stood, a figure of patience and steady grace, guiding us without forcing a single outcome. I have learned to lean into the slow bloom of healing in others. Time has carried away some of the scenes, the exact shape of the lilac's bloom, the precise colour of the morning light on the kitchen table. But it has not erased the core truth I found that summer, that small acts of care accumulate into a life of steadiness and compassion. That is the meaning I carry now, the ballast that keeps me in old age from drifting into bitterness or impatience. The sparrow's wing, mended and then set free, taught me how to hold life gently, how to listen to its tremors, how to wait for the moment when growth becomes possible, how to trust that, with enough tenderness, a break can become a bridge. And if there